When the woman was asked to testify in court for the trial, she testified in the pre-trial, and she was asked to testify in the trial as well. Tim Burke made a strong point in his motion to the judge to get her testimony in because the MO he was establishing or trying to establish was that Leonard Paradiso took his victims to water. In the paper, they were painting this picture. Everyone had that image of Joan, and that's what everyone was concentrating on. They weren't thinking about Maria Iannuzzi or these other victims. They were thinking about what happened to Joan. And Mr. Burke is saying that Mr. Paradiso doesn't bury his bodies. That's not his M.O. And, of course, many years later, Joan was found buried. The woman became so ill that she had never told anyone these things. All of a sudden, she's pressured and she comes out with these things. She refused to testify at the trial. She refused. She said she was too sick, too ill, and that the FBI had not honored promises they had made her.
Okay. Well, you know, at this point, because you're speaking about the FBI's involvement, etc. here, it is time to broaden this out and to try and give people some kind of a context. All of these events are taking place in the Boston of Whitey Bulger. Whitey Bulger still on the loose on the 10 most wanted list, and there were two competing mobs in business in the Boston area, and the FBI and the state police, or regular police investigation, were all involved with turf wars, which deeply compromised the independence of judicial investigation. Because not too long ago down in Florida we had John Connolly, former FBI agent, who was convicted of passing information to the mob. This was a very messy scene that all of this is taking place in, and one where we know we have good reason to suspect that things don't get investigated the way they should, eh?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. As I have learned about these two officers that were so deeply involved in Joan's case, the undercover cop worked in an area called East Boston. East Boston was the epicenter for mafia crime family, the Angulos.
This is Trooper Palumbo now. We're speaking of the bearded individual who is the lead investigator. Yes, so he's in East Boston.
That is correct. That is correct. He's working with the prime suspect in the other murder case, the Iannuzzi murder case. They meet 20 to 30 times. It's undocumented. Trooper Palumbo has taken over as the lead investigator on that case. And all of the incriminating evidence in the Maria Iannuzzi murder was absolutely whitewashed. They swept that case under the rug.
And you maintain that there was, in fact, a very good prime suspect, not Leonard Paradiso, who did actually have a lot of incriminating evidence attaching to him, but who may have been protected because of his role in these information passing enterprises that were going on between the law enforcement and the mafia interests on the ground.
That's correct. He was a drug user and a self-admitted pusher, testified to that on the stand. He had enough information that he could provide that would make these cops look good if they go out and bust somebody out in East Boston involved with, drug trafficking with the mafia. And, of course, anything that happened in that aspect, the FBI's pursuit to crack the mafia at that time, was beneficial to Whitey Bulger and, the Irish mob and his drug trafficking. His industry, so to speak, really flourished at that time, and these were very brutal people.
And Trooper Palumbo was operating on the ground in East Boston in the heartland of the Angiulio mob, who were the rivals of Whitey Bulger's Irish Mafia.
That's right.
On the ground, they were simply acting against one mob to help empower the other mob, was the de facto result of all this. Yeah. And
an interesting twist in there, as Trooper Andrew Palumbo was assigned and became involved with the Assistant District Attorney Tim Burke, assigned to both Joan's case and the Maria Iannuzzi case. Tim Burke was a very young, green person in the prosecutor's office, and he was writing warrants to bug Whitey Bulger. And all of those things were leaked and compromised whenever they tried to bug him. So that Massachusetts State Police and state officials were really interested in breaking up Bulger's operation. The FBI was, at odds and wanting to break up the mafia. And you've got two cops here who were very tied into the FBI who were working with state officials who were providing information there that was very beneficial to Whitey Bulger.
Let's bring it right back to this alleged serial killer that Tim Burke has been promoting the theory about, Leonard Paradiso. He was prosecuted and found guilty of the murder of Marie Iannuzzi. But there was a David Doyle, who you point out was a much more likely suspect but may have been protected. So prior to the Iannuzzi case, did Leonard Paradiso have any track record that would indicate we're dealing with a vicious, ruthless, multiple serial killer? Was he a saint or was he some kind of sinner?
He was not a saint. He had been charged and convicted of an assault back in, I believe it was 1973, a woman by the name of Constance Porter. He served time for it. He was in prison for 3 years and then put on parole, was doing extremely well with his parole. His records there indicated he was, granted travel permits on a regular basis. They moved him to a quarterly review as opposed to once a month. Mm-hmm. He had done very well. We'll never know whether he was totally getting his life on track, but he had a long-time girlfriend. At one point in time, he had a room in their home with her parents. The evidence, the documents that have surfaced do not point to this man having that kind of profile, that kind of violence. There's nothing that supports all sorts of accusations that were thrown out to the press, incriminating this man for all sorts of things.
Right. There's good evidence that a David Doyle was the likely suspect in the murder of Marie Iannuzzi, and that Leonard Paradiso ended up getting, through the legal process, found guilty of the murder of Marie Iannuzzi, and through the media, painted guilty of not only the murder of Joan Webster, but also of many other women.
Yeah. The former, Assistant District Attorney Tim Burke, who has published these allegations, is still out there promoting and trying to convince families of other victims that Mr. Paradiso, killed their loved ones as well.